What we mean by that is youth with serious emotional concerns and complex needs. Couple of things. Resilience is an expectation, not an exception for youth with complex needs. It's one of the take-home points. The definition that the group came up with is resiliency is an inner capacity that when nurtured, facilitated, and supported, three key words, by others, empowers children, youth, and families to successfully meet life's challenges with a sense of self-determination, mastery, hope, and well-being. And what we mean by that is nurture, we're thinking about family, faith, and friends, facilitated by those important people, the helpers in the world, whether it's services, supports, teachers, accommodations, and supported by the community. And when we talk about this young man, we're really talking about how do we build these important supportive relationships across the board. Come on. All right, thank you. This is from Ann Maston. She did a longitudinal study on resilience, and she came up with a bunch of recommendations and conclusions that I think are very important for this young man. The first thing is late resilience is possible. So just because a young man is struggling at 17 doesn't mean that they can't still be resilient and learn. And there's some of the recommendations we gave today really spoke to that. What would it take to turn this child around? And there are turning points in people's lives. Competence in a developmental task at one stage, forecast competence at a future developmental stage. And so that one of the recommendations was if we just start building some skills somewhere, that would bode well for this young man. And once resilience starts to happen, it tends to endure. And emerging adulthood is an important window for this. Not all youth who struggle as youth struggle as adults. Why did I pick this slide to be fancy? I have no idea. But here we go. So what are some of the protective factors from the research? And some of this is from Bob Friedman, some of it's from Ann Maston, and actually some of this is from our Resiliency Ohio leadership group. Positive connections and supportive relationships. A number of you had mentioned that in different areas of this person's life. We also talked about what would a supportive family relationship look like, and I believe Wilma talked about even if the family's not raising the youth, what about the connections to the family? We do know that kids at 18 usually go somewhere when they're done with us, and that's home. So, working on that relationship is going to be important. A number of you also mentioned adult mentors. Adult mentors outside of the home are some of the most powerful protective factors in a young person's life. Pro-social peers and activities. It's hard to, well, I'm sure that they're getting some in placement, but when he gets out, that'll be an important piece. Building competencies is another important area, skills, abilities, talents, and I think Patty was talking about what are some of the abilities, the strengths, the talents of this young man. Two of the areas that the research says that we should focus on are problem-solving skills and emotional regulation skills, and this comes from Ann Maston's work. So of all the skill sets out there, she picked these two as critical skill sets for any youth to have, problem-solving and emotional regulation. Hope and optimism is another protective factor. And for this young man, we have to ask, where is that hope for him? Or where is that view of a positive self in future? Does he have a futures orientation other than a criminal aspect? Expectations that maximize potential. This came from our youth group, our resiliency group. We wanted to make sure that any expectations that are given to this young man are realistic and achievable. And if they're not achievable, what strategic accommodations can be put in place to help the young man? Sanctuary and safety, obviously, is going to be important for this person to have a safe place to be and safe places to go if he's feeling threatened. Another area that the Resiliency Leadership Ohio came up with was justice. A lot of young people that have grown up in the being helped by us, sometimes end up in the juvenile justice system rather quickly And so there's always a question about equality and fairness, about how they're being treated. Family members, parents in particular, voiced very clearly that feeling validated and valued for doing the best they can in a difficult situation was a critical factor. And that wasn't always the case when folks received services. And the last one in terms of protective factors is contribution and participation. So what opportunities can we give this young man to be successful? And I love the Project Rebuild idea. Could we get him involved in something that using his hands out on the field that would give him an opportunity to start giving back, but also learn a new skill? The research from the Search Institute basically says that kids with lower amounts of assets, 0 to 10, have higher antisocial behavior, have higher violence, more likely to be depressed. And that kids with higher levels of assets do a whole lot better. And this holds true across race and culture, as this slide shows. And here's just another tidbit on power of protective factors. Basically revealed that the presence of 3 protective factors reduced the risk of suicide attempt by 70 to 85% for each of the gender, racial, ethnic groups, including those without identified risk factors. So it has the power to protect also with a suicide ideation. One of my favorite quotes by Kenneth Thompson, I just have to read it. "What makes you ill is not the same thing that makes you healthy." All righty. So let's just talk about translating resilience to practice. This is fairly simple model, but really the more assets you have, the better. And the more support you have, the better in multiple environments. So in school, home, community. And then the less risk situations, risk behaviors, risk environments, the better. And for this young man, it's going to be imperative that those environments that I believe it was Dr. Gentile that said, keep him as busy as possible in every area of his life, and among others. And Chris, too, thanks. Safety is foundational, especially for youth who have a trauma history. One of the, this is from Somero, and the literature basically says that interventions need to be as complex as the multiplicity of risk factors and contexts. And I love that. So most interventions in a single life domain really don't give you the major bang for your buck that you're looking for. Another thing from Steve Hobfall out of Kent State, target factors that promote resilience and healthy development, not just risk factors. And make sure that you're targeting assets across settings. And it should look like this. So what are the risk and protective factors in each of the major life domains of the youth? And for me, for really any youth, we need to be thinking about safety. We need to be thinking about building competencies and skills across settings. We need to be thinking about establishing connections and functional success through relational supports and accommodations. We need to make sure that we can't forget about poverty and basic needs. This young man, when he comes out, is going to have trouble finding housing, is my guess, and the family's having trouble finding housing. So how do we help with that? And then overall, how do we build assets in every youth in a futures orientation? More on adaptive skill set building, motion regulation skills. I'm talking too fast. Problem solving skills, and probably some others. I mean, we talked about processing. I think Carrie brought that up, and I think that's an important thing. Is he able to understand what we're saying to him? Does he have executive functioning skills? And how are we at creating accommodations for this young man, depending on where he's at? And it sounds like some of the highly structured places where he's been have been, mildly to decently successful with that. I think the big question for many of you was relational support. So, Brandon sounds like he's created an amazing relationship with this young man. Kudos to Brandon. It sounds like there's a interesting relationship with mom that could be nurtured and maybe rebuilt. I don't know. and other family members, but that was brought up on a number of occasions. The other thing that we could do is also think about recovery mentors, as Dr. Getz had said, or adult mentors that could teach him a new skill. So once he gets out, really developing those relational supports is going to be critical.
Before he gets out.
Before he gets out.
That will carry through.
That is carried through, I'm being told, in my earpiece.
Sorry.
That's okay. It's all right. And so I just want to do a little case application. It'll take me 2 seconds, maybe a minute. Okay, 3 minutes. So what are some of the risk factors for externalizing behaviors and substance use? Well, we know what those are in the literature, and this is really why programs like multisystemic therapy and functional family therapy were built. High family conflict, family management problems, family criminal behavior, family drug use. Risk factors include academic failure, lack of commitment to school, lack of connectedness to school, early and persistent antisocial behavior, illegal activity, drug use, and a trauma history. And this young man had a boatload of all of that. I put this in here because there's a whole literature on criminogenic risk as well. And because it was mentioned a few times, I thought I would, just mention this. So the risk to reoffend is based on antisocial behavior, personality, family factors, his antisocial activities, substance use, and negative peers. So these are all areas that we want to target in trying to help this young man stay away from those kinds of things. Contributing factors could be head injury. We didn't explore that. Perceptions of opportunity, perceived thrill of doing the crime. He seems to get a charge out of doing crime. And costs and rewards of offending. So if we did the counter of that and said, what are the external assets that really help a youth stay away from that, it would be a strong family with strong family boundaries, connected to school with strong school boundaries, neighborhood boundaries, the adult role model, positive peer influence, high expectations, family supports, other adult relationships, caring neighborhood, caring school. I think what we're going to have to do is rebuild, in a sense, all of these things in different ways for this young person to be successful. The areas of focus that MST would focus on and functional family therapy would be parental supervision and monitoring, pro-social peers and activities, being connected well with the school, monitoring substance use, having a futures orientation, and again, skill building. All right, I got through it. I want to mention that if you want